What's up, YouTube? It's time for a book review today. We're gonna have a little book club discussion about Charlamagne Tha God's Black Privilege, the subtitle being Opportunity Comes to Those Who Create It. It may come as a surprise to some of you, but my brain does function somewhat adequately, and I can read words. I don't just spend all day yelling useless shit at a camera about death metal. Anyway, this is a book that I was really interested in checking out, and I actually went inside of a Barnes & Noble on the day it came out and bought it, which I don't think I have to elaborate on why any of those things are somewhat unusual for me. And it all just has to do with my interest in what this guy has to say. Being a tri-state area guy, I've been a Breakfast Club listener and online viewer for years now. And Charlamagne has to be, like him or not, one of the most colorful, unique, and notoriously opinionated radio personalities out there, especially when it comes to the music industry, which can often feel like just this tight-knit, dick-sucking fest where having an opinion is not only frowned upon, but can actually be really counterproductive to your career. But that's precisely why I've gravitated towards the guy and towards this book. Because personally, the only people I want to hear from, regardless of what field of work they're in, are the straight shooters. The people who actually say what's on their mind and who you can tell are doing so organically, which unfortunately is something that I think is more rare than we might want to lead ourselves to believe. That's why when you find someone like that, you tend to hang on their next word as almost a refreshing escape from the politics and fakeness and bullshit in your own life. I think that's partly why brutally honest stand-up comics like Louis C.K. and Chappelle and Jim Norton are as successful and have as passionate followings as they do. Because they're hilarious and outstanding entertainers, sure, but also I think people are just sick of having their own filters on all day and other people around them having filters on all day. And we just want to hear someone's real thoughts on a topic for once. And for me, Charlamagne is one of those straight shooters who I can rely on for that. Plus, he's a fucking funny, entertaining guy, and his field is hip-hop, which happens to be such a huge part of my life. So my long-winded point is that I picked up this book because I enjoy Charlamagne's blunt, honest, unapologetic style of communicating. And even if I was going to disagree with every single word of what's in here, at least I was going to get that. And I was going to be entertained along the way. And based on the press that he did leading up to this book, it seemed like it was going to be sort of like a self-help autobiography hybrid, which just intrigued me more. And that's more or less what it is. It's structured like a self-help book in that it's based around these 8 principles by which he lives his life, but it's very autobiographical in that you get a lot of his childhood and his come-up story. Any book with a good narrative should immerse you in another world, in the author's world. And this book does that. Charlamagne takes you down to rural South Carolina and shows you around. Shows you the seeming lack of opportunity that surrounded him and how easy it was to get caught up in that. He walks you through fights and problems at home and his years in school and his 2 arrests, which his second one in particular, which was a drug bust, was a real formative experience for him because it was a real get your shit together kind of moment. Because as the saying goes in this book, if he didn't get his shit together, he'd wind up dead, in jail, or broke sitting under a tree somewhere. What's funny about the drug dealing stuff for me personally is growing up in the suburbs, I was never that close to that world to the point where I could have been in it. But the few people I've known that do sell drugs, you can't help but hear things from them. And this is all hearsay, so I don't know if it's true. But you hear things like a brick of cocaine, just a solid brick, is around 10 grand. And chopped up correctly has a value of about 100 grand. And I'm just sitting there hearing this shit like, what a fucking margin. Like, when am I ever going to get a 900% return from the stock market? So I hear this shit and I'm just like, maybe I'll switch careers. Maybe I'll just, But then reading this and reading about what Charlamagne went through selling crack on the small level that he was doing it, that's a real demotivator in that department. Like, this book will crush your drug kingpin dreams real quick, which is a good thing. This narrative, though, is central to Charlamagne's classic rags to riches story, but more importantly, it's key in terms of believing him. Because you shouldn't be taking life advice from just anybody, but seeing the bleak environment that he came from and what he was able to turn it into, it gives him some credibility. Like, this might be a guy who has a few helpful things to say. So on one hand, there's the intimacy of his personal story and his come up, but my absolute favorite thing about Black Privilege is that it's just brimming with fucking motivation. As a reader, I found a lot of what's in here to be very inspirational, motivational, and very get up and go. My single favorite page in the book is one in which Charlamagne answers something that I've been wondering about for years. What does a typical day look like for him? And he walks you through how much shit he gets done in one single day, and it's fucking remarkable. And the way he breaks it down is, look, there's 168 hours in the week. That's plenty of fucking time if you allocate it right and you're disciplined about it. And personally, he confirmed something for me that I found happening in my own life, which is if you really want to work hard at something, you've got to give up a lot of your social life. And it was really comforting to hear that from him as someone who now stays in like 85% of my weekend nights. But these are the sacrifices that people like Charlamagne have made and continue to make to be where they are. You can't have it both ways. You can't just go out having fun doing mindless things and expect everything to work out and expect to have enough hours to put in to make everything work out. And this book had me thinking the whole time, like, this motherfucker wrote this whole thing while being on the air every day, doing multiple TV shows, doing a podcast, and raising a family. Like, that's fucking grinding. And I'm not saying that we should all aspire to be workhorses, but if you want this level of success, there you go. That's part of how it happens. And I love how on the page after that great motivational talk, he quotes a bar from the Jay-Z song Feelin' It, which is just one of my favorite songs of all time. And that's another fun thing about this book if you're a hip-hop head, especially 90s, since Charlamagne's a little older, so he leans 90s. You get a lot of fun hip-hop references. And the line from that Jay-Z song is basically just about how don't smoke weed all the time, just once in a while, because there's shit to do. Aside from hard work and making sacrifices, another main theme of black privilege that I really connected with was this running theme of the power of honesty. Charlamagne, like I said, is notoriously blunt and infamous for saying exactly what's on his mind. But in this book, he explains that him being that way is deeper than just trying to be entertaining. He explains how people being truly honest with you can be your most crucial asset. And conversely, having a lack of honesty in your inner circle can be disastrous. And the two examples he uses are T-Pain and Kanye West. With T-Pain, Charlamagne tells the story about how when T-Pain was first starting out, he asked him to sing live on air without autotune, and then proceeded to tell him live on air how fucking terrible he sounded, which T-Pain got pissed, yada yada yada. But a few years later, T-Pain ended up publicly thanking Charlamagne for kind of waking him up and making him take his craft more seriously. On the flip side, he talks about his infamous Kanye West interview, and how during the interview, there were people from Kanye's crew who were in this other room cheering him on as he talked. But the only catch is, the room they were in, they couldn't hear what Kanye was saying. So they were basically just these fucking yes men cheering him on, regardless of the fact that they had no idea what he was saying, which is just toxic. I just love this sentiment of honesty being king. And I completely agree with him. And unfortunately, people who truly keep it 100 with you are so rare. Like, seriously, think about your life and think about how many people in it do you think are being entirely truthful with you all the time. Whoever comes to mind, keep those people around. Because not only are those people your real friends, they're going to be so important to just keeping you in check. I can't even count the number of times where true friends of mine have been like, you're being a fucking dick about this, or like you're being an idiot. And, you sit there and, maybe you kind of react defensively. And a lot of the times they're right, because they have the unbiased, objective view as someone who knows you. And the other thing about this book is it's just funny sometimes. Like, Charlamagne reveals the first rap he ever wrote, and it's so fucking terrible. It had me cracking up. There's a part in there about his podcast partner, Andrew Schultz, just having to constantly shit everywhere they go because he has like overactive bowels or whatever, and the fact that he has no shame about it, like he'll just get up during dinner and announce, I gotta take a shit regardless of who they're with. Crack me up. He talks about worrying about whether his dick is big enough, which is obviously hilarious. It's definitely written with a witty, don't take me too seriously kind of vibe, which is important because these topics of finding yourself and career aspirations, yada yada yada, are heavy, anxiety-inducing topics for people, and this book would not work without that balance. Which brings me to the last chapter of this book, where Charlamagne takes a few pages to address the concept of black privilege, and hence the title of this book, and really takes some time to specifically address his black audience. And even though this chapter isn't aimed at me, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I don't have a lot of melanin going on here, I can definitely relate to the overall theme of accepting your circumstances, but not letting them define you. That's something that really transcends race. We all have obstacles we face, whether it's racism or having an unsupportive family or being ugly. We all have different disadvantages that are playing against us. But what Charlamagne is saying is that it's up to us to first realize that we're privileged to be here at all. Like, being alive is a privilege in and of itself. And then it's up to us to take control of our own situation. Sure, the spiritual and belief in God component of what he's saying here doesn't vibe with me at all because I'm an atheist, but also as a hip-hop fan, spirituality has always been such a huge part of hip-hop, so I'm used to that. Either way, what he's saying here is meant to be empowering, and I think if people can look past that obvious irony of the phrase black privilege, I think they'll see what he's trying to get at here. So I'd recommend this book first and foremost to anybody who's trying to break into radio, because you're going to get a lot of specific insights into that business and a lot of helpful tips on the internship come up and everything. I'd of course recommend this to anybody who's a fan of Charlamagne and wants to learn more of his backstory and have a book full of his style of communicating and his sense of humor. And I'd recommend this to anybody with a dream or a passion who's currently staring down that long, intimidating road that's seemingly full of endless obstacles and just insurmountable odds. I think you're going to find a lot of inspiration in these pages to just stay on your grind. So yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of this book. It was literally a 2-week read for me. And then it took another 3 weeks to get a review recorded for it, but that's beside the point. This book definitely made me watch Charlamagne's interviews a little bit differently now, because I just know so much more about him as a person and his backstory and kind of the way he thinks. And I understand that his next book is going to be solely about the radio interview process. So I'm looking forward to checking that out too. As always, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, or shoot me a message so we can continue to talk music, and I'll see you guys soon.